All right, welcome to this special simulcast edition of the No Quarter Given podcast and the Powers on Sports podcast. I'm your host, Jason Powers. Peter Blake's going to be joining us in just 1 second. And we have a great guest for you, a Buccaneer legend, Super Bowl champion, a guy that I have some familiarity with. I was a former kicker back in my day. One Martin Gramatica, the legendary Buccaneer kicker, third-round draft choice out of Kansas State, Super Bowl champion on the 03 Buccaneers Super Bowl team, still in the Tampa Bay community doing all kind of great things. We're going to get into Martin about his career, about his broadcasting, about his soccer coaching, all kind of stuff. So, Martin, welcome to the podcast, sir.
Thank you. I appreciate you guys having me. It's always fun talking Buccaneers football. I enjoy that.
Yep, that's we're going to talk again. We're going to talk about Martin's career, and we're going to work in the No Quarter Given podcast theme this week of the second matchup with the Carolina Panthers. Martin had an unbelievable game with the Panthers back in the day, the 2002 season we're going to highlight as well. First of all, Martin, third-round draft pick 1999. Did you have any idea you were going to be that high of a pick going into that draft?
Well, they have the mock drafts, right before, and I had my range was between second and fourth. So I kind of had an idea, but until you see your name flashing on the screen, you don't believe it, So I just kind of waited. But it's funny because I talked to Joe Marciano, the special teams coach, and he kind of told me that what the Bucs wanted to do. So they gave me the whole scenario. If they wanted Sean King in the second round, if they got King, I would go in the third. If not, they may even consider taking me in the second. So I was hoping Sean would go somewhere else. That way I could go to second. But it worked out pretty good. So I had an idea, but until the phone rang, I wasn't sure. But it was definitely a phone call I'll never forget.
And obviously the Buccaneers with their history of draft. I mean, again, drafting a kicker that high in the draft. Janikowski he was a couple years before you, correct?
No, he was after me, and Gruden told me he drafted him that high because he wanted me, but he didn't get a chance to get me to Oakland. So
right.
So.
But I mean, but just in all seriousness, the pressure of having to come to a franchise as a kicker is that high of a draft pick, and especially a team like the Bucs that were ready to win. What did that pressure feel like to you going into your first mini camp, training camp? That kind of pressure, knowing they were going to rely on you big time to be a big contributor early.
No, absolutely. I think it goes both ways. It's two different kinds of pressure. If you're a free agent, you have the pressure that if you make a mistake, you're out of there and they'll bring somebody else in. But then when you do get drafted high, you have the pressure of having to live up to the expectations and make sure you deliver. So I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I didn't want my teammates to say, well, we got this kicker in the third round. We should have gotten a receiver. We should have got a linebacker, somebody that could make more of an impact. So I didn't want my teammates to have that second guess, and not only teammates, the organization as well. So I did put a lot of pressure on myself to do good and deliver. And luckily, I was fortunate to be in a great locker room, a locker room with a bunch of leaders that, took me under their wing and helped me out a ton. So that was nice to have that guidance from the veterans.
I didn't realize that this doing research on you. I knew you were an All-American. First of all, you were a two-time All-American, Kansas State. I didn't realize you tore your ACL in one of your first couple of years at Kansas State. Having to come back from that and then becoming the player that you became. How did going through that experience of missing a whole year impact the way you trained, the way you focused, that kind of stuff in your college career?
Well, that's a great question, because I always look at the time that it happened. I thought, my career's over. This is it. Back then you tore your ACL, and it wasn't a guarantee that you'd come back, because a lot of times it was a career-ending injury. This is in '96 when it happened. But for me, it was a blessing, because I learned how to train. I learned how to get stronger. Before that, I was just a soccer player that became a kicker. So I didn't really work out in the weight room as much. Because in soccer, we didn't back then. It was just you run around and you stay in shape. That's it. So that injury forced me to get in the gym and strengthen everything, not just my leg, but especially my leg, because you strengthen it before the surgery to go into the surgery with strength, and then obviously the therapy afterwards. So my 2 years after the injury were 100 times better than my first two before the injury. So yeah, it was a blessing, even though at the time it was hard and a long road, to recovery. But after it happened, and when I came back so much stronger and better.
So you grew up in Buenos Aires, Argentina. You moved to the United States when you were, what, 8, 9, 10 years old, something in that range. First of all, how did your parents and all that, how did you guys decide to move to LaBelle, Florida, of all places, kind of in the Fort Myers area? How did LaBelle, Florida from Buenos Aires happen?
Well, we landed in Miami, which I think 99% of the South Americans, you land in Miami, and then from there you decide where you go. And we were just coming to the West Coast to try to find work, and we stopped at a gas station in LaBelle, and the lady working at the gas station is like, I recognize your accent. It's like, are you guys from Argentina? And yes, we are. And she's like, so am I. Wow. So she was married to the sheriff, the town sheriff, and immediately said, well, come to my house. You guys can stay at my house, find a job here. It's a great town for kids and family. So, I mean, that would never happen in this day and age, I don't think, for somebody to, just because you're from the same country, they're like, stay at my house, So, wow. So we stayed, I think it was like a week until my parents found jobs, and we opened up a restaurant there. So yeah, so it's crazy how it happened, but we're great. LaBelle was great to us. I mean, it's a little town that, hard to get in trouble in a small town like that.
So you go through high school, have a good high school career. Obviously, you never played football until you went to high school, I don't think.
I only played 1 year. Yes, my senior year was the only year that I kicked.
So Kansas State finds you. Bill Snyder, the legendary coach at Kansas State, building that program in the mid to late 90s. How was it you going from small town LaBelle, Florida, to Manhattan, Kansas, another small town, playing for a coach that, they'd had struggles at Kansas State, but you knew you were going to probably be an impact player and get to play. How did all that come about, going to Kansas State and Bill Snyder?
Well, yeah, because I only played 1 year, I didn't really have that many offers, and a lot of the schools were afraid to give me a scholarship because they were, hey, you're too green and you're too raw. Which, I mean, at the time I was getting upset that they were saying that, but when I look back, and they were right. I never really had a kicking coach in high school because my high school never had a kicker. They had an old lineman kicking with their toe before I kicked, and Bill and Santiago. So we didn't have any coaching. Once I got to Kansas State, Bill Snyder was like a father figure. He was amazing, kept, definitely holds you accountable, taught me a ton. I left there with so many life lessons from Coach Snyder. But a guy that really helped me was his son, Sean Snyder. At the time, he was trying to get in the league, so he was punting, but he was always working out at Kansas State, trying to stay in shape and stay fit for that phone call. And so I'd work out with him, I trained with him, and he was definitely the one coach that really impacted me a ton in college as far as my technique and how to kick, because I went from being a soccer player that just kicked the football to actually becoming a kicker thanks to Sean. So yeah, it's another blessing that I ended up at Kansas State. I loved it there, the community, the fans, the organization. I mean, the whole, from top to bottom. Bill Snyder's a class act, and all the coaches. Jim Levitt, who recruited me, because at the time, Jim Levitt and Bob Stoops were co-defensive coordinators my freshman year. Right. And then they ended up having their phenomenal careers themselves as head coaches. But yeah, it was a great coaching staff and a lot of lessons, from all those coaches.
Very cool. I want to bring in Peter Blake. Peter Blake's the host of the Sports Web. You've seen Peter and I do the No Quarter Given podcast. We're doing the simulcast podcast today. Welcome to the podcast, Peter. Let's get to the 2002 season, Peter. I want you to take the lead. 2002, Carolina.
What's going on, Martine? Welcome to the No Quarter Given podcast. And I got to ask you, take me back to 2002, especially the Carolina Panther game, but the season overall. First and foremost, is it like yesterday for you?
Oh, yes. I mean, it's and everybody talks about the Super Bowl and winning the Super Bowl, and that's obviously what we we remember. But the whole journey was just an awesome year with it, and the locker room. Coach Dungy built a locker room with great character, and then we had Coach Gruden come in and fiery energy. And I think the combination of that locker room that Coach Dungy built with great character, and then having Gruden motivate us and push us, it was just an awesome year from start to finish. It was as far as like practice, hanging out with the guys. It was the most fun I've ever had. We just had such a good chemistry with the teammates. Everybody got along. So I enjoyed that whole season. It was a lot of fun.
Talk about the Carolina game, because that was nip and tuck at the time. Of course, Carolina was giving the Bucks everything they could handle. Of course, they had some injuries that day. I believe Brad Johnson was out. Rob Johnson was starting. They were starting to develop their defense, and they really depended on you that day. Go back to that moment when you faced the Carolina Panthers later on in that year.
Yeah, that was one of those games that, Brad was out, so Rob stepped in. Sean King had to come in and throw a pass to get us in field goal range in the last drive. So it's one of those where you could say everybody had a part in it. Our defense obviously played phenomenal, not allowing a touchdown and getting the turnovers back. Special teams got a turnover with a fumble that they fumbled a punt, and we got the ball right back to get us in the field goal range. I remember Warren Sapp was on the field goal team. We had so many injuries that, Rich Bisaccia had to be creative, and Warren was, always had my back. So he'd raise his head. If you need somebody to block, I'll go in there and block. So that's, for me, it's individually, it's one of those memorable games that I'll never forget. For me, my personal one is my favorite one because of, the impact, the long field goals. 3 of the 4 field goals were in the fourth quarter with like, I don't remember exact times, but I think like 4 or 5 minutes left.
Yes.
And it's one of those that I'll never forget. And I see it, in my head, and I still feel like I'm there today. It's one of those games that I'll never forget.
And Peter, real quick, Peter, and it's a bitter division rival in their stadium. Yeah, in an important kind of game. I mean, we were the Buccaneers were the team that everybody thought was on the rise, and you were the guy that in that arena in Carolina on the road, you kicked some dagger field goals in that game. That just has to make you feel great.
Yeah, but it was a whole team win. Like I said, we had our leader Brad out with an injury. Rob had to step in. Rob goes down. Sean comes in, throws a pass. Our defense, we've had some injuries on defense too. Guys stepped up. We had the turnovers when we needed them. So it's one of those. And that was the
ultimate team win.
Yeah, absolutely. But that was our style, though. Hard-nosed defense, and we fought till the end. And it was one of those that nobody gave up and nobody quit. And it was one of those that I think that game motivated us to realize, look, it doesn't matter if we're not firing on all cylinders. We'll figure out a way to win as a team, and we did. So that to me, that was one of those games that helped us believe that we could win any game.
You're all about emotion, because I remember your celebrations after kicks. Who was the guy that motivated you, the teammate on the team itself that motivated you when you made a big kick? Who was the first guy to pat you on the helmet or come up to you on the bench and say, good kick, great kick, we need you? Who was that guy that motivated you the most on that Super Bowl team?
Yeah, there's not just one guy. There's so many. We had so many leaders. Like I said, we had Brooks, Allstott, Lynch, Sapp, all those guys. For me, I looked up to them when I was in college, and then all of a sudden I'm in the same locker room being teammates with them. So for them to say good job, Rondé, I remember Rondé would come up to me all the time too, and he was at the time not a leader yet. He was a leader, but not like what he ended up being, a Hall of Famer. But he was still pretty young himself. Brad as a quarterback, he was awesome. Always motivated. Always, hey, we want to need you, or we'll get you in range. Where do we need to get to? Like he'd ask me so he was very. He communicated a lot. For a lot of guys, sometimes they leave the kicker aside. But with Brad, great relationship, great guy. So I can't just say one, because we had such a great locker room. I mean, that was one of those where I believe like everybody got along.
But for you, Martin, real quick, for you, Peter, Martin, the battery of you, the snapper, the holder, and the kicker, that's your own little team. Tampa, talk about that relationship with those guys, because no matter what the other guys are blocking, if the snap's not good and the guy can't hold the ball very well, makes your job a lot harder.
Oh, 100%. You have to have that trust and that friendship with your holder just to know, like, look, he's going to get it down. And Tom was the best. Tom, and we had an awesome relationship. We hung out, and you hang out 24/7. There's no, it's a kicker, punter, long snapper. And at the time, Mike Soul started the season. He hurt his foot. And then we brought in Ryan Benjamin, who snapped for Bill and Santiago, just Bill at USF. So I knew Ryan, and it's funny because they didn't want to sign him, because if you look at Ryan, he doesn't look like an NFL player. His body does not warrant him being in the NFL. So I said, look, take a look at him. He's a great snapper. The first tryout, they didn't sign him. They signed somebody else. And we had issues with a couple snaps. So then they brought him back, and then he finished out the year and then won the Super Bowl, obviously. So it was one of those where, whoever stepped in did the job, and Ryan did a great job coming in, snapping it out. But Tupa, I mean, I could close my eyes and know the ball was there every time. I trusted him with everything. So it was great to have that relationship with him.
Martin, when the Philadelphia win happened in 2002 in the NFC Championship game, was your mindset basically we got over the hump, the team's mindset, we got over the hump at that point, you guys were going to win the Super Bowl? Was that your mindset? Do you feel like that was your teammates' mindset once you got over that big hump of the Philadelphia Eagles?
Oh, 100%. I feel like that was our Super Bowl. That was who we had struggled with in the past and who knocked us out of the playoffs in the years prior to that year. So 100%. Once we won that game, I don't think it mattered who on the AFC made it to the Super Bowl. We were going to roll through them just because of the motivation and the chemistry, and we were just firing on all cylinders. By the time the season ended, our offense was playing well, and our defense obviously was the number one in the league. So yeah, it didn't matter who we played in after that Philadelphia game, we were winning.
And a little tidbit, Martin is another record holder in Buccaneer history. He scored the first ever point in the Super Bowl with a field goal. So he'll always be in the record books for the first ever Buccaneer to score a point in the Super Bowl. And one other quote before Peter goes, remember that 2002 season as well, late in the year, the Bucs clinched the bye when Martin kicks 5 field goals when the Bucs win 15-0 in Chicago, not at Soldier Field, but the University of Illinois, because Soldier Field was getting renovated. Again, talk about that atmosphere of you're probably used to kicking in Soldier Field, and now you're having to kick it in a new venue at the University of Illinois. Yeah,
no, it was tough because, it's an open-ended stadium, so it was really windy. Fortunately, all 5 field goals were with the wind at my back. So, so if you're gonna have wind, let's take it in our back. And I was lucky that all 5 went that way. So, it was a tough environment. Their fans, obviously, Chicago has a great fan base, but the stadium was really tricky for me. The only positive was that it was a field turf, so I knew the footing was going to be nice.
Yep.
Because anytime I ever played at Soldier Field, by the time we played them, it was late in the year and there were really no grass left. So it was all like mud and sand. So the footing was always an issue there. And in Champaign, we didn't have that because it was field turf. So I guess that was the positive we can take about that one.
Peter, I know you got to go in a second, so go ahead.
Yeah, I got one final question. I've interviewed the great man, Tony Dungy. As a coach and as a man, what was your biggest lesson you learned from him?
Well, I mean, there's so many. If I just give you one, it wouldn't give it any justice. What I tell people is what you see and what you hear about Tony Dungy, he's 10 times better. It's like he's a real deal. And then a lot of times you see people that talk the talk, but they don't walk the walk. With Coach Dungy, he talks the talk and walks the walk. He definitely impacted all of us. And I feel like on the charity side, on the giving back to the community side, I think that was the first time I ever did any charity work, because in college you really don't have any time. When you're a college athlete, you're going 100 miles an hour from class to school to practice. So when I got to the Bucs, I couldn't understand. At the time, Derek had the Brooks Bunch. He was taking kids to Africa to show them the history, and then Sapp had his, and all these guys. And I'm thinking, what is this? I never even heard of this. So thanks to Coach Dungy, we all learn how to give back or how important it is to give back. So I always thank him for that.
Thanks a lot, Martin. Appreciate it as always. And thanks a lot for coming on the No Quarter Given podcast here on the Buck Power Podcast Network.
No problem. Nice talking to you, and enjoy your Rolex.
Yeah, Peter's got to go do his own show now. Me and you are going to keep talking for a minute, but Peter's got to go do his own show. There's the Rolex for you if you're watching us on the YouTube channel, on the Powers on Sports YouTube channel. So, Peter, have a good show, man. All right, Martin. So you're listening to the Powers on Sports podcast, No Quarter Given podcast simulcast. We're with Martin Gramatica, Super Bowl champion, Tampa Bay Buccaneer legend. I didn't realize this looking at your stats. You only played for the Buccaneers for 5 years, correct?
Yes.
I didn't. For some reason, I thought you played for the Buccaneers a lot longer. You made 155 career field goals. You were 76% in your career. You were a 2000 All-Pro selection, second team All-Pro, 2000 Pro Bowler. Talk about just your time in Tampa. How did you, I mean, obviously you were familiar with the state of Florida. How much more comfortable did that make you, knowing you were close to your family, you're back in the area, warm weather, something I'm sure you really enjoyed year round? Talk about that transition back to Tampa.
Yeah, no, if coming out of college, if you get drafted, you go wherever. I mean, you're not going to complain. You're going to go and make the best of it. But for me to be selected to come to Tampa was basically the team that I wanted to play for, because it was close to home. Bill was going to USF. Santiago ended up playing the USF, later. Jim Levitt was at USF, who recruited me to Kansas State. So I had a lot of ties to the area. Yep. I just never really hung out in Tampa before. I would just, I grew up in the Fort Myers area, LaBelle. So yeah, it was, for me, it was like coming home. If I had to pick a team, the Bucks were the one, just because that's the one where, my family, my brothers were around. So I couldn't believe it when I got the phone call. And I always wanted to play in the state of Florida in college, and I never got a chance to play a bowl game because, there was a chance we almost played the Orange Bowl. There was a couple of times, and we never ended up playing that. So I was always disappointed that I didn't get the chance to play in Florida. And then all of a sudden I'm with the Bucks and playing pretty much a bunch of games in Florida. So it was, it was great. It was like coming home.
That's awesome. That's all. Are you the only guy still from Argentina to ever play in the NFL?
Well, Bill played too.
That's
so
right. But your family, there's been nobody outside of your family from Argentina that's ever played in the NFL, correct?
Not that I know of.
That's right. That's even. You're a rock star in Buenos Aires, I'm sure. So let's talk about your NFL career. So joining the Buccaneers on the rise in '99, the Bucs had made some headway with Coach Dungy. You knew you were coming to a team that was defensive oriented. You were going to be a critical element. The Bucs weren't scoring 35 points a game like today's NFL, where the passing game was so pass happy. Again, was that a mindset that you had to get used to know every week they're going to need me? We're not going to blow teams out 38-7. We're going to be in a lot of close games with the defense. The offense was a little more conservative at the time with Coach Dungy. Talk about your, just you maturing into that as a young player.
Well, I didn't really know what I was coming into. I never really followed the NFL much, because when you're playing college football, you don't have really time. And I knew I wanted to come to Tampa because my brother was at USF and right. It was close to home, but I didn't really follow the team close enough to know that, this is a defensive team. They're really going to need a kicker. So I kind of, I probably was a good thing, to not know how important it is to make every kick. And you realize early on, and pretty quick, and as a kicker, that every game in the NFL, doesn't matter if you have a good offense or a bad offense or a good defense, they're always close games. It's not like college where you have 2 or 3 close games and then a bunch of blowouts at times. There's every kick is important, and that's where the focus and it's so much different than college. Where you have to focus on every kick. In college, if you miss a kick, at times it doesn't matter because you're winning by 28 points. Where in the pros, it's rare that you kick a field goal when you're up by 28. So every kick matters.
So growing up in Buenos Aires, was Maradona your guy?
Oh, 100%. That's why I always wanted to be 10. Unfortunately, Sean took 10, so I had to settle for 7, which I'm very happy. It worked out pretty good. But yeah, I always wore a T-shirt with the number 10 and his name in the back. That was my guy.
That was your Maradona. Yeah, absolutely. Those of you that don't know Maradona, back in the day, in mid 80s, early 90s, he was the king of world football, man. He was the legend he was, and he just passed away here in the last couple of years. So great inspiration for you. All right, so let's get to, you leave the Buccaneers in 2003. You bounce around the league a little bit. You got injured. Talk about how the injuries really affected your next phase of your career with the abdominal injuries that you suffered from.
Yeah, no, unfortunately, I think that's what really messed my career up. The injury started the year, the Super Bowl year. I started to feel a little pain in my adductor, and they just couldn't diagnose it. At first, it was maybe a lower ab strain, then it was a groin strain. It could be a hernia. So I just dealt with it that year, and I felt so physically strong that it didn't really affect me. The day after the Super Bowl, you do your exit physicals. They check me out, and you have a hernia. So they're perfect. I'm glad you found it. Let's fix it. Unfortunately, I was misdiagnosed, and it was a sports hernia, not a regular hernia. So the mesh and all the staples they put in there really didn't do much. So 2-3 months after that, the pain was even worse. So I played the last 2 years here in Tampa with a ton of pain. There's weeks that I didn't even get a chance to practice. I couldn't. So I physically couldn't get my body strong. So then I had the right surgery with a doctor in Philadelphia. Felt better, but he's like, look, the mess you have in there with the mesh and all that, I'll fix it, but I don't know how long it'll last. So it was one of those where I ended up spending more time in the training room and doctor's offices and cortisone shots than enjoying it. So it was the last half of my career was not as enjoyable as the first half. Let's put it that way.
Sure. So you finished up in 2008 in New Orleans. Kind of was your last hurrah there. With how tough was it to realize that you reached the end of the road, that you couldn't either physically do it, didn't want to do it, and the interest in you wasn't as it was a few years back? How hard is that to you as an athlete at a championship level?
Oh no, that's the worst feeling. You know, I couldn't watch football for like 2 years. I just didn't, because I felt like I still had more to give and more to play, but physically my body couldn't do it. My basically my leg. You know, everything felt great except my adductor, my leg. So yeah, it was really tough because you never want to retire because of an injury. You know, you want to go out and either, you know, go out on top or just say, look, I'm too old, I can't play anymore. But to go out, you know, 6 weeks into the season with a, you know, basically I pulled 5 muscles in one kick. It was just to the point where my body was just basically shutting down all the cortisones and medicine that I was having to take to try to get through games. So, you know, your body at times says enough is enough. And I knew it then, you know, once that last kick, I knew there's no way I could do it again.
And a guy you know very well that played in his mid-40s, Adam Benatari. What a job by a guy like him, just whether it's luck of the draw as far as your body goes. But what I mean, a guy, you know, Tom Brady's our version of that now, but Adam Benatari played to his mid-40s as a kicker in the league, and just how admirable is for a guy like that to be able to last that long.
Oh yeah, and the great thing about that is I got to be on the team with him for 6 weeks because he was injured. He had a groin strain, and Coach Dungy would bring me in and fill in for him. So I got to pick his brain and learn. But by then, my body was already had suffered enough damage that I couldn't really recover from it. But it was really good to see his work ethic, his training. He had a stretch guy. So a lot of times people think, well, he got lucky and played to his 40s. So there's no luck about it. You know, you have to have the luck to not get injured, but also have to take care of your body to not get injured. And you know, Tom Brady does that. Adam Benatari did it. Unfortunately for me, it was something that, you know, was a minor thing that became larger, I feel, because of the misdiagnosed by a doctor. Because if they would have fixed that right the first time, who knows how long I could have played. So that's the only regret I have, if you look back, is not getting a second opinion. Because when you're young, you assume that, you know, the NFL doctors are the best, and you don't know that sometimes, you know, they could make mistakes. So at the time, looking back, I wish I would have seen the real adductor doctor, you know, just to get it fixed right. But yeah, I mean, but you have to give credit to Adam and Tom, you know, for playing that long, because it's not easy.
No, you're right. I mean, hell, just to make it in the NFL 1 year, forget 8 or 9 years like you got in. And I mean, it's the toughest league in the world to make and stay in the league, especially at your position, where it can be a whirlwind of a roller coaster of you're great 1 week and 3 weeks later you're out of a job. So, I mean, full credit to you for the ability to do what you did. And all right, let's talk to Martine about after football. You've had some business interests. You stayed in the Tampa Bay area. Talk about your foundation, the Gramatica Foundation, what you're trying to do in the Tampa Bay area with the Gramatica Foundation.
Yeah, no, thank you for asking. We help combat wounded veterans. We built a full house for them if they need it. Now, the way the economy is, you know, it's a lot harder to build a full house. Right. And when we started, you know, 9 years ago, the banks were giving free lots because they had to get rid of them, you know, foreclosed lots. Now, that same lot that we were getting for free is probably 80 to 100 grand. So it's really hard to build a full house. So we've partnered up with Habitat for Humanity, other nonprofits to do either, if we can, a full house, but if not, some remodels, wheelchair accessible ramps, remodel kitchens where everything's, you know, handicap accessible for these veterans. So for me, it's very important to show my kids and also the kids that I coach soccer now, and to show them and thank our veterans for all their sacrifices, because we talk about how much we sacrifice as an athlete, but these veterans, our military give the ultimate sacrifice, and a lot of times their best friends die, their family members die. The first recipient of Charlie Lemon, he's an amazing guy, he lost both legs in Afghanistan, and he's the most positive, nicest guy you'll ever meet. And I'm thinking, if I was in his shoes, I'd be so bitter and angry. And that's what I'm thinking. But he's just a happy guy. So look, my best friend died in the explosion, so I have to live a full life for both of us. So it's really rewarding. We get so much more out of just seeing their gratitude, their smile, then and they thank us, and I'm like, you don't need to thank us, we're thanking you for what you did. So I'm excited that we were able to do it. And it is the Gramatica Family Foundation, but it's really not. It's the whole community. We've had so many people help out, and so many people come to our events, and just the community's been amazing.
Well, tell everybody where they can find you online as far as the foundation website and all that good stuff.
Yeah, the foundation website is gramaticafamilyfoundation.org. And I post a lot of stuff on Instagram. It's Martin Gramatica 7. That's basically where they can get the most information. I always share either dates for volunteer dates or build dates, or a kickball. We do a kickball tournament. That's our biggest fundraiser. But yeah, so gramaticafamilyfoundation.org is where they can find all the information.
And another interesting thing, you were playing in the league during 9/11, that week back from 9/11. Talk about that experience around the league. I don't know where you guys played, where the Bucks were at that week, but talk about that week of 9/11, and it works into the veterans you deal with and all the first responders that we are so proud of and so thankful for.
Yeah, no, everybody, I think everybody knows and remembers what they were doing the day or when it happened or where the phone call. I get rolfing, which is like a specialty massage, right. And I'm coming out of that, and my wife calls me on the phone and said, "Hey, they crashed a plane in the Twin Towers," and I'm like, no way, it can't be right. And then I turn on, obviously I'm in the car, so I turn on the radio, and then you go home and you watch the footage, and you're just in disbelief. I mean, you think it's a movie, it's like, there's no way this could be happening in real life. So, yeah, the games got postponed that week. We were supposed to play Philly. So they postponed it, and then we played them, I think, the week during our bye week. I don't remember the exact, but I remember the games getting postponed. But yeah, just one of those things that, you know exactly where you were when you heard about it, but you didn't think it was real at the time. I didn't think it was real until I really saw the footage on TV.
Let's get to your budding broadcasting career. This is the fourth year you've been working with. You've been calling Buccaneer games on the NI Spanish Broadcasting Network. You do the games in Spanish. Talk about how fun it is for you to do Buccaneer games, and again, in your native language, your Spanish language. How fun is it for you to do that?
Oh, I love it. So the first year when we sat down, because I got a call from the Bucks and TJ Reeves a bunch of times. Hey, they're thinking about doing Spanish radio, and never happened. They'd call, and maybe it would. And then this time, TJ and then Jeff Ryan called me, and they're like, "Look, I think we got a guy that wants to do it." I'm like, "Sure, okay, no problem." And I'm thinking, like, I'll never hear from these guys. Yeah. And then, sure enough, I hear from Neil, the owner, and then he calls me up. We meet. 5 minutes later, we got an agreement. Like, oh, let's do it. And I told him, I said, "Look, I coach soccer. My priority is my kids' soccer. So there may be some games that I can't do." Right. And we had 3 guys at the time. And then after the first year, I loved it so much. I said, and I didn't want to say no and then regret it. So I said, let me try it for 1 year. If I like it, we'll do it again. If not, find somebody else, not a problem. And man, I love this. So now I rearranged my soccer schedule over the NFL schedule, which that should be the priority, obviously. So I love doing it. The feedback from fans is amazing. We have an app. So on Caliente 96.1 is the app. So we have fans that listen to us worldwide. We have a huge following in Europe, Mexico. I'm from Argentina. Carlos Borges, our play-by-play, he's from Venezuela. So there's a huge following in Venezuela. I mean, it's crazy the amount of messages that we get every week from people all over the world listening to our broadcast. It's really cool.
All right, last thing I'll get you out of here. You mentioned coaching soccer. You're wearing your soccer hoodie right now. How much joy is it that you're coaching your son and so involved on with your son on the soccer front?
Yeah, it almost was the same story as the broadcast. They asked me to help out my kids' team about 12 years ago now, and I said, "Well, I'll help out. I don't have a lot of time, but I'll try." And man, I was hooked. And then from there, it's like an addiction. I just love doing it. I love watching And for me, it's even better because I'm coaching my kids too. So I'm spending time with my kids. I'm able to help and influence other kids. Besides playing, getting involved in either coaching or broadcasting the game, it's the second best thing. Obviously playing gives you that adrenaline that nothing can duplicate that, I don't think. But this is pretty close. When I watch my kids play, when I'm coaching them on the weekends and training, we practice 4 days a week and then we play on the weekends. So I get to spend so much time with them. So it's been a lot of fun. I enjoy it.
Well, fans, you can't see this unless you go to the Powers on Sports YouTube channel. Martin's got about 20 game balls behind him at his house. It's all kind of different game balls. What was the toughest stadium to kick in outside of Tampa? What was the hardest place to kick?
Well, I didn't really enjoy kicking in Soldier Field or Lambeau Field because, those by the time I think they paid us back. They would come play us in the summer where it's really hot.
Yeah.
And then we'd play them the last game of the year. So it was by the time we got there was no grass left. There was cold, muddy. But I do remember my rookie year playing in Lambeau Field. It was a Sunday night game, I believe it was. Either Sunday night or Monday night. And I just couldn't believe that I was at Lambeau Field with all the history and all the the history of that stadium. So it was pretty cool. But they were not easy to kick in though.
Well, Martin, it's been a real pleasure, man. I appreciate the time, man. Keep up the great work. We're, obviously coming up week 18 here, you'll be calling Carolina and the Bucks on Sunday. Tell everybody where they can find them locally as far as the broadcast.
Yeah, it's Caliente 96.1, and that's the local station, but it also has the app. Or like I said, you can find me on Martin Gramatica 7. I always put all the radio stations that are broadcasting it plus the app. So any of those areas you can find our broadcast.
Well, man, it's been a real pleasure. Thanks for the great commentary, history, and all the great stories. Again, you're listening to the Powers on Sports and No Quarter Given simulcast. Martin Gramatica, Super Bowl champion. All the best, Martin, moving forward, and and let's get another Super Bowl. I want to see you in SoFi in about a month.
Oh, I can't wait. That would be awesome. Yes, sir. I'd love to see that again. So appreciate you having me. I had a lot of fun.
Awesome, Martin. Have a great week, sir. And we'll see you next time on the No Quarter Given podcast. Let's go, Bucks.